back on the Young Turks special coverage of Tanks for Nothing, military parade, and Donald Trump birthday combined. Donald Trump's 79. The United States Army is 250 years old. It is 1 year older than the country. Next year we'll be celebrating 250-year anniversary of America, but the Continental Army was formed on June 14th, 1775, and then of course, you'll never guess what date we declared independence. Oh, right, July 4th, 1776. So that's why it's 250 years. I'm really good at math. I did it in my head, just like Ronnie Chang. All right, so you saw there that obviously our coverage is hosted by myself and Ben Cohen. And joining us now is Colonel Larry Wilkerson. The last time he was in a government position, we started a giant war. But he has made amends for that in many, many, many ways. And so he was, of course, Chief of Staff for Secretary of State Colin Powell. And he's got too long a resume to read otherwise. Colonel Wilkerson, good to join us again. We appreciate you.
Good to be with you, especially now.
Yep. So, all right, let me start out really broad, and then we'll pull up the parade on the side here as we talk. What's your take on the current military situation that we're in? And when I say that, I mean the enormous Pentagon budget now pushing up to $1 trillion. Us now seemingly at least somewhat involved, if not a lot involved, in yet another war in the Middle East. And a lot of the neocons from back in your day wanted this war with Iran for a long, long time. So, especially given your experience in the government, where do you think we stand today? Have we fixed anything, or are we almost worse off than we were during that Bush-Cheney era?
I think we're in deep trouble. I think we're in profound trouble, both domestically and internationally. I think we're becoming a pariah on the world scene, just as, of course, Israel is. And I don't buy this business and never have. I like John Mearsheimer. I like Steve Walt. I taught their paper to my classes at the George Washington University and also at William and Mary. But I don't think we are in AIPAC's hands, the Congress is and others who are bought and paid for. But Israel's acting for us. They're our attack dog. Lindsey Graham said it truthfully on the floor of the Senate when he said, if they weren't doing it, we'd have to be doing it. Meaning, if they weren't killing the Palestinians at a ferocious rate, we'd be doing it. I think that's what is the truth. I think Israel is our attack dog in the Levant. And I think we're now paying and are going to pay a serious price in the days to come for that posture.
Yeah. I agree and disagree, to be honest. I think there's no reason for Americans to needlessly slaughter Palestinians. I think Israel is actually leading, but that's okay. Either way, it's the same result. And so this Iran war, I've got to ask you at least one more question about it. Just like back in the Bush-Cheney era, when we were being told by the neocons, so don't worry, it'll be quick and easy and we'll be greeted as liberators. I'm now seeing some of the same talking points. Oh no, the Iranian people want to be bombed because they'd love to get rid of their own government that's oppressive, etc. And this is for self-defense, and we will get peace through war. So are you getting a sense of deja vu here? And how bad do you think this will be? Do you think that maybe we can end this, in some short period of time, or is it going to drag out and be as disastrous as Iraq?
Well, I can't let you get away with that comment without a riposte.
Okay.
You disagreed with me. There are people, I know them, I've met them, I've talked with them in our government and behind our government, and they're the more important ones, who are so angry still with Iran for having thrown out the Shah and spent time and effort to keep American hostages for 444 days and ruin a president of the United States, et cetera, that they have wanted since that moment to take on Iran. And now they're using Israel to do it. Then Trump can deny it all day long. He is aiding and abetting this process. As to the war itself, I think we're looking at a possible regional conflict. And Vladimir Putin in his phone call probably hinted at that, but the press didn't carry any of that, of course. It was an inane phone call, according to the New York Times and others in the way they reported it. But I can imagine that Vladimir Putin, as circumspect and prudent that he is, probably ripped Trump a new rear end. And rightfully so, in my view, because he has postulated, he's postured, he's done everything he possibly could. And so is Xi Jinping in a more low-key way, that this is not good. This is not something that should be happening. And I think we're going to look at a possible conflagration all across Southwest Asia. And the Iranians are going to start it now. Apparently, they have said categorically that they are going to hit other targets, meaning us. And Marco Rubio's statement that we had nothing to do with it was a flagrant lie, and they know that. And I think they're going to take him up on that. I think they're going to hit other U.S. assets in the region. And just so your listeners know, those assets are fundamentally unprotected. They are not combat troops. The 50,000 or so that are there at Al Udeid and Qatar, there's no air defense. There's no security other than just base fence security. At Khalid in Saudi Arabia, it's much the same. It's a naval headquarters in Bahrain. It's just got the people there, the indigenous people, to protect it. These are not fighting soldiers and Marines, as it were. So you've got a really vulnerable population. If Iran really does this, even if we stop a lot of what comes in with aircraft out of Al Udeid, they're still going to produce a lot of casualties, which is why I think we did a partial non-combatant evacuation operation anyway. We moved a lot of civilians out. But this is not good.
So I'm going to let Ben in here in a second, but Larry, I got to follow up on that real quick on two fronts. One, you mentioned the people behind the scenes that we don't see who push for things. The right wing has a theory about a deep state, et cetera. I never know who the people behind the people are. So I'm curious about that and how they're so old, they haven't let 1979 go. That's insane. But on top of that, then when you said the second part, I've got to ask about that too, because it seemed to me, and we talked about this on the Young Turks on Friday, that, well, Israel's very well protected. They've got Iron Dome, they've got us, they've got Jordan knocking down missiles, right? But I said the same thing you did, but we are not protected in the Middle East. We're sitting ducks. And so we appear to be a very, well, in the words of Don Rumsfeld, we're a target-rich environment, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so is it almost a plan for the American soldiers who are left exposed to get hit and killed, so it drags America into the war?
That's part of it. That's a big part of it. I'm convinced it is. I think we want to go there, and we need the right excuse to do it, and we're posturing ourselves right now to get that right excuse. And if Iran gives it to us, we go. And let me tell you, this is not going to be easy. You do not conquer a nation of 90 million people, 52% of whom are Persian and very homogeneous. We have steeled them now. In my entire time in government, one of the positive things about our relationship with Iran that the Iranian people refused to put aside was they liked us, especially those under 50. And those under 30, it was almost universal that they liked us. They liked what we stood for. They liked who we were. They visited with us. We visited with them, exchanges with their universities and so forth. Even though we were having this animosity all the time, it wasn't between the Iranian people and the American people. Now they are steeled in their anger and their hatred for the empire. And that's what bombs do. That's what rockets do. That's what killing people in their bedrooms with their women and children around them. That's what that does. We now have a 90 million country that's so much bigger than Iraq. It's 4 or 5 times bigger than Iraq. And it's got mountains. I had the war plan for that place. When the Soviets might have come out of Afghanistan down to Chabahar and Bandar Abbas at the southern end of the Gulf, I had to do war planning at Pacific Command for that time. That is rough terrain. We will lose our butts in Iran if we try to do something really damaging. And the only thing that will ensure their nuclear program is stopped cold is either a nuclear weapon, and I know there's a nuclear option in General Cirillo's briefing to Donald Trump, and an invasion. You could do it with a nuclear weapon or two, or you could do it with an invasion. And if either way, it's disaster in my view.
I'm sorry, I just got to follow up real quick. You mean to take out their nuclear sites effectively, you've got to either have ground troops or they're buried so deep in the mountain you have to nuke it?
Yes, that's exactly
what Jesus Christ. Okay, all right, Ben.
Well, what do I think about this? My understanding is that we had a nuclear arms treaty with Iran, and the first time around, Trump pulled out of it. So, what does he expect, or what did we expect? I mean, you have a treaty, one party pulls out, you expect the other part to still abide by the treaty? I mean, it seemed like we had the problem dealt with.
Ben, that's one of the significant problems that we learned when Powell was Secretary of State. We can't pass treaties anymore. We had a list of treaties that was an arm long, beginning with the Law of the Sea Treaty, which almost every American that we consulted with wanted to see passed, but it takes a 2/3 majority. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee refused to bring any treaty up in the Congress. That was part of the problem with that. It was not a treaty binding under international law and under our Constitution. The Constitution says a treaty is binding law, domestically as well as internationally. We won't pass them. That's what made that agreement so vulnerable, because it could be negated by the next president, which, as you said, was.
Yeah.
We can't get the Senate to do a 2/3 majority. It's nonsense. We're not a functioning country anymore.
Yeah. So, Larry, let's get back to who pushes for these wars, right? So, to me, in terms of the giant military budget, that's kind of obvious. Defense contractors push for it, right? And I see a revolving door where generals retire, become defense contractor consultants, get paid handsomely, wind up with a really nice house in McLean, Virginia, and since they got millions and knew that the way to get hired was to give Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, et cetera, billions before they retired, right? So that one I think is largely clear. It's driven by one giant, very powerful lobby who has a direct financial interest in us wasting our money on their products, right? But when it comes to war, I mean, to your point, and to now the whole country is seeing it, and in such an interesting way. And Ben went on Tucker Carlson's show, and I want to get him in to talk about that in a second. And the reason I bring that up is that Tucker Carlson just yesterday said Donald Trump is complicit in this war, and that we should not be going in. And an enormous percentage of MAGA agrees with Tucker Carlson, right? And Marjorie Taylor Greene said something similar to that effect on our show. And then Charlie Kirk even. So you have the right wing, the left wing has always been anti-war, the middle wing, everybody. And the wars are disastrous. I mean, we've now had how many experiences where we wasted trillions of dollars and got no good result. So, but a handful of people managed to push us into these wars every time. So who are those handful of people, and what did they gain from these wars?
It's a group that encompasses everything from 30-year-olds to 80-year-olds. And it has a long memory, and it has an agenda that is spelled out best in terms of dollars. And you've just cited how those dollars are used sometimes. I'm convinced now we have an entirely new echelon in this group too. It's the same group. It's been around since the 30s. It's been around since FDR, actually before that. But it's Smedley Butler actually had to testify to the US Congress about some of this group. But it is a group that feels like its money, its power, indeed its very life, collectively speaking, is involved with the empire's imperial edict. And the edict is to control the world. I'm not just being lightheaded here. It is to control the world. That's why we're having so much trouble right now with the war in Ukraine and the pursuit thereof and the Europeans' devotion to it. Why are they devoted to a war that we started, and we did, we started the Ukraine war, that is clearly between Washington and Moscow and NATO as an adjunct, using Ukraine's blood and treasure and guts as a proxy for that? That is all a part of this warp and woof of keeping the imperial writ solid, as one person put it to me in Colin Powell's office and to him. Anything that stirs at the bottom of the mountain, which we're on the top of and controlling, we will smash it with our military or sanctions or both. That's their attitude. But it is generated out of their lust for power and money. And we've had them. We've had them throughout our national history. We just haven't had them in positions of power like they are today. And this is very scary because Donald Trump does not know any of this. Donald Trump does not read. He does not know history. He has no idea of the forces that his MAGA group is marshaling underneath, both domestically and foreign policy-wise. He has no idea. He's a tool of it, too. A clownish tool.
So, Colonel Wilkerson, when you were the chief of staff for Secretary Powell, did you have interactions with this group? Who was
the number 3 man in the State Department was a leader in it, John Bolton.
Yeah, so talk to me about that. So how is what is this group? How is John Bolton a part of it? How do they exercise power?
They exercise power in a number of ways. They exercise it by being anonymous. Who are the billionaires behind this? You can name a few. You can name Peter Thiel. You can name the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, who's having a problem with it right now, apparently. You can name a few others, but there are many, many more behind them. Just as there were many, many more behind the people who tried to push FDR out in the 30s and even all the way up to World War II. These people don't go away. You call them fascists in other countries. We don't like that term, but that is a good term to describe them. They're always with us. They've always been with us. Today, they're gaining maximum power because they have infiltrated a lot of the bureaucracy and a lot of the backup for the bureaucracy. And they're in other places too, like business. You shift money over from Lockheed Martin to Anduril and Palantir, for example, in order, as Pete Hegseth says, to get technology that is actually built into a weapon system that's useful before it atrophies with time's passage. And you create a whole new world of these people. And you get a lot. Look at the nuclear industry right now. There's no one from the Manhattan Project, no one anymore in the nuclear industry. What you have is a bunch of 40 and 45 and 50-year-olds who are not seized of the Cold War attitude about the danger of nuclear weapons, who right now are beavering away with billions of dollars at their disposal in the labs and elsewhere to build new and more sophisticated nuclear weapons so we can strike first and ride out anything that comes back at us. That's happening right now. Totally ignorant of that are the American people. I'm not sure that they would do anything if they knew about it. But we're building out right now, $2 trillion is going to be spent on a whole new family of nuclear weapons. And the purpose of this ultimately is to achieve a first strike capability and therefore annihilate our enemies who are nuclear weapon states and live through the whole thing ourselves. And people say, you're crazy, Larry, you're crazy. No, I'm not. Go out to Los Alamos, go out to Sandia Labs and check it out. These people are proud of what they're doing because they're technicians, they're engineers, they're young and they're aggressive and they're moving out just the same way the Manhattan Project did, only without the kind of guidance that they had from the leadership at the top.
Well, Larry, since you were the chief of staff for the Secretary of State when we launched the Iraq War, I'm afraid that your expertise frightens me. So because you do tell a frightening story here. So Ben, on the what Larry mentioned there about the fight back. So some on the left say we have no allies on the right; they'll just follow whatever Trump says, and they like war and they'll be fine, etc. But you've gone and talked to the right wing from time to time. Is there a genuine anti-war movement there? And can the American people, right and left, unite to try to push back against the forces that Larry's talking about?
Yeah, I think if we start trying to focus on the things we agree on instead of focusing on the things that we don't agree on, we can make some headway. Libertarians and the Cato organization have been opposed to the US trying to control the entire world, since I got involved in this, which is nigh on half a century now. I mean, for Larry, it's longer than that, I'm sure. I think people hate war. I think the American people hate war. I think people all over the world hate war. And the US wars, as Larry pointed out really well, is about the US strategy, which is written in black and white, of hegemony. And it's essentially saying that the policy of the US is that we must be king of the hill. And if any other country starts to develop militarily or economically, we are to regard them as an enemy, because we insist on the world being run and controlled by the United States. And it's really interesting when you take a look and see how the US ranks versus other countries on scales related to quality of life, healthcare, education, wealth disparity, poverty. Reading scores, we don't rank real high. I mean, US is not number one, except when you get down to weapons exports and military spending.
Yeah.
That's who we are.
So I want to show some of those numbers in a second. Don't put them up yet, Marissa, but because I want to have the audience try to guess where we are with it. And then we're going to put it up as a graphic, what Ben was referring to. And then I'm going to get to the cost of the wars and then ask Larry a question. So we're number one for obviously in per capita GPD. So we're the richest country in the world is the easy way of putting it. Okay, so then you would think, like, for example, on happiness and well-being, if we're number one, maybe Sweden, ekes us out and we're number 3 or something like that. No, we're number 25 on happiness and well-being, right? Because we're not serving the American people, we're serving these elite group of folks, the corporations, etc. How about standard of living? Standard of living, I mean, you got to be number one. We're the richest country in the world. Nope, number 20. Number 20 in the world. And why is that? Because we're number 61 on income inequality. And so now, Marissa, let's put it up. There you go, thank you. Perfect, so you see, I mean, just exactly as Ben described, it's a disaster. Number 46 on maternal mortality. Our moms are dying giving birth. Even though we're the richest country in the world, we're number 46 on that. That is insane. And so number 43 on environmental performance. Reading, come on guys, richest country in the world, we should be number 1. We're number 13 on reading. Number 11 on access to healthcare, but number 1 on incarcerated citizens, number 1 on military weapon exports, and number 1 on military spending. So this is not a healthy way to run a democracy. Now, later, we're going to show you some of the things that we sacrificed in order to spend that money on the military. But first, as I promised, I want to tell you how much each of the wars cost, because this is really interesting. So obviously, we're going to do it based on inflation-adjusted numbers. So the Revolutionary War, the one that gave us freedom and a country in the first place, obviously, and since it formed America, most important war we were in, a meager $2.4 billion. For just $2.4 billion, we got America, okay? And so, we got the muskets and the rifles, and I understand, of course, things cost less back then, and we had a good number of deaths, 25 to 70,000 deaths, right? And 17,000 from disease. And that's why, by the way, George Washington mandated the smallpox vaccine for his troops. Anyways, Civil War, $96.5 billion. That's understandable because we had 620,000 deaths. That's the most deaths we've ever had in any war in American history. And then World War I starts to get more expensive because of the equipment. Understandable, $334 billion in today's dollars. And obviously in that war, not just us, but the world loses 9 to 11 million people. I mean, think about that, Jesus, man. We lost about 10 million people for no reason, so that rich men could fight over, where they draw the lines on a map and feel more powerful. But if you thought that was bad, look at World War II. Now that comes in second. How could it come in second? It was World War II, but it does, and you'll see why in a second. $4.1 trillion. And there obviously overall 70 to 85 million deaths. Lots of wonderful Americans who unfortunately died there, and that was obviously a just war in so many ways. And by the way, on that one, to Larry's earlier point, we certainly have massive disagreements with Russia in many things, and I'm certainly not happy about their invasion of Ukraine. But the Russians did lose 27 million people fighting back the Nazis. 27 million. So an enormous cost there. Korean War is 389 billion. 4 to 5 million people were lost in that war. Vietnam War, even more expensive, 843 billion in today's dollars. Lots of equipment going there, and 2.5 to 3.5 million died, and 58,000 US troops passed away, and over 1 million Vietnamese fighters and millions of civilians. So that was, of course, a disaster that a lot of us lived through. Not me, but you guys did, and protested too. And a wonderful anti-war movement was born out of that. But now, finally, Gulf War, 116 billion because it was a limited operation. And by the way, George H.W. Bush and at the time Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney were right to not go into Iraq proper. They were right to only do Kuwait. Unfortunately, they did not learn that lesson. And of course, we get to the #1 war of all time. The global war on terror has now cost us $8 trillion. Twice what World War II cost, 8 trillion. Over 900,000 people killed, etc. All right, now, Larry, before we let you go, obviously you were involved in the global war on terror. A lot of numbers about how many Iraqi civilians died there, hard to tell. Looking back on it, I'm gonna ask an interesting question. Is there any way that we could have prevented it? I mean, just a mass casualty event, and it cost us $8 trillion overall, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the rest. Could we have prevented it? Is there any lessons we could learn there to apply to what's happening in Iran today?
Absolutely, we could have prevented it. We could have listened to 2.5 million people in the largest war protest in human history, as far as I know, in London, which I was in the middle of while it was happening, and had no effect. But if we'd listened to those people, if we'd stopped the effort to unseat Saddam Hussein, if we just hadn't gone there, even George W. Bush said it in his memoirs. He said, had I known there were no WMD, he's the only one who's been contrite to that extent. Had I known there were no WMD, I would never have ordered the war. He says that in his book. Yes, of course we could have not done that war, but we would have had a circumstance in the in the Levant, in Southwest Asia, that would have been absolutely intolerable to this group of people that I'm telling you about is running the empire. Utterly intolerable to them because they had a plan. The plan went awry in Iran or in Iraq. They were going to take Iraq, then they were going to move into Syria, then they were going to move into Iran, and it was going to be a clean sweep, and that's exactly what they called it too. They were going to eliminate all the enemies that we felt we had in Southwest Asia, and I'll tell you something else. When it came down to it, they were going to eliminate Saudi Arabia.
Oh, I had not heard that one before.
You don't like people who keep telling you what to do because they charge you so much for their oil. That's been in the back of some of these people's mind all along. Prince Bandar, since that, when he was their ambassador here in Washington, but he laughed it off. Bandar Bush, they called him, because he was such a friend of Barbara and George. But he was a savvy guy, typical Saudi. He'd bribe you with $1 billion at the drop of a pen, and did, the Prime Minister of England. If you know anything about the aircraft sales to South Africa, he probably gave Tony Blair at least half of that and kept the other half for himself. So that's the way they do business, though. I mean, he'd tell you that. If he was sitting right here, he'd tell you, what's wrong with that? That's the way you do business. You grease the pan, and then, and when we grease the pan, we really grease it because we have lots of money. We don't like that. Some of the people in the empire here don't like that. We would like to cast the Saudis aside if we could. And if they didn't have lots of oil, we would have already done it. But we find it difficult to do it because they do have that oil.
Yeah. So as we watch this military parade go by, and you tell us about the secret forces that are trying to, run the empire, and how many wars are going to start to run the empire, it is kind of a haunting scene. So, Colonel Larry Wilkerson, thank you so much for joining us and giving us insight into this. And that was very informative.